Simracing gear is getting more and more expensive. Today we're going to have a look at the Najam Simtec K2X pedals, featuring a 95 kilogram brake at less than 200 euros that performs as well as significantly higher priced pedals. So first of all, these pedals were provided by Najam Simtec for this review, but as always they don't get to see the script or the video before it's posted, and all the opinions are my own. So the two pedal set we have here is 185 euros including taxes, and an additional clutch will be available soon. I don't know the price for that though. The pedals as they are here also have a damper and a haptic feedback kit installed. I'll leave the links to this in the description below, but the base pedals don't come with it. So let's start with the design, and I would say it's very functional. There are definitely prettier looking pedals out there, but I think for this price, if you compromise on design but not on functionality, it's a good thing. These pedals actually do come as a kit, so you will have to put them together yourself. It is super easy to assemble and it shouldn't take more than 1 hour. If you can assemble Lego, you can assemble these pedals. There's also a nice build video provided by Najam Simtec, so it's hard to do anything wrong when putting these together. So while they might not look super fancy, I think the build quality of the parts that you get is pretty good. And it's a pretty clever design that's being used here, where they use lower rated load cells with a lever design that still gives you the necessary brake pressures that sim racers are looking for. So I've had them on the rig and I've been just as quick with these pedals as with pedals that are 1000 euros or more. They really work exceptionally well, and they're also easy to upgrade with stuff like the damper or the haptic feedback kit here. To save cost, the pedal arm actually uses aluminum profiles for both the throttle and the brake. And the side support here is metal as well. There was a first version of the pedals, the K2. This is how the old version looked like, where the side support actually was made out of some plastic material, but that's improved in the K2X, and the pedals feel very, very solid. At the pivot points, brass bushings are being used, and in terms of play of the pedal arm, this is comparable to the best pedals that I've reviewed here, and there's pretty much no play at all. I did have to put a little bit of lubrication on the links here and also on the elastomers on the brake, because otherwise it would squeak a little bit. But just do that while you're assembling the pedals, and considering that way more expensive pedals typically have similar problems, I think this is very acceptable at this price point and very easy to solve. Let's put the brake aside. We'll start with a closer look at the throttle first. The adjustments you can do is limited. You can adjust the pedal plate in height. You can adjust the throw by loosening this bolt here. And then you can basically determine where the end stop of the throttle pedal is. You can also adjust the preload of the spring, and that's pretty much it. That being said, the default configuration, how you put them together when you follow the assembly instructions, feels good to me. I didn't really change anything and just used them as they are here. The pedal arm is a 20 by 20 millimeter aluminum profile with the pedal plate directly attached to it. So you can, in theory, put this a little higher. There are 2 or 3 more millimeters. You can put it lower. I wouldn't recommend it. And the pedals are relatively compact, but not by a crazy margin. If we compare this to the Cube Controls pedals, for example, you can see that this is maybe 2 centimeters higher or so. But this is more than fine, probably comparable to SimGrade Terra. Then the throttle uses a little load cell in the rear that you can see here. And there's a lot of lever mechanics being used in these pedals. So this spring here will push onto the gray lever arm, let's call it like this. That is also like sitting on the bolt in the bottom here. And then this gray part pushes onto the load cell that is mounted there, and that way you get the travel reading of the pedal. It is a super strong throttle pedal. You can configure this to be within 6 to 10 kilograms of pedal force, which is a lot. So for comparison, the VRS pedals that I really like in the strongest configuration on the throttle measured at about 6.5 kilogram of pedal pressure measured in the middle of the pedal plate, and this can go up to 10. So it's a really strong pedal. Your leg will hurt if you use this at 10 kilograms, but I think it helps a lot to control modulation of the throttle if you have a little bit more resistance on the throttle. The throw is adjustable between 39 and 53 millimeters. I use the longer throw option, and 53 is not a crazy amount of throw, but in my opinion, sufficient. In order to adjust the preload, all you need to do is like compress the spring with your hands and then move this nut here towards the spring, and that gives you more initial preload on the spring. Then we also have the PCB attached to the side of the throttle, but we'll talk about that later. All right, let's look at the brake next. There's also not a lot of adjustments you can do in terms of ergonomics. You can adjust the pedal plate in height, but that's pretty much it. But as with the throttle, I think the brake feels good in the default configuration. It uses a 30 by 30 millimeter aluminum profile as the pedal arm, which is a little bit stronger than the throttle. And considering that you can put up to 95 kilograms of brake force onto the pedal face, I think it's needed. One thing I do not like is there's no end stop in the other direction. So you can, in theory, move the brake to this. It's not really a big deal like at all, because when you use the pedals normally, well, you just push on them. You will never like pull on them, but just something that I noticed while assembling them. The good thing is it makes it easy to show you the elastomers that I'm using here. So what I went with is the combination of the red and the yellow elastomer, which gives the hardest configuration. There are 6 different combinations of elastomers that you can use. There's a green 80 Shore A, 2 yellow 85 Shore A, and 1 red 95 Shore A elastomers in the box, and this little cup. The cup helps both with making the brake feel more progressive when you compress it, and also it helps that the elastomer that will sit within this cup will not be compressed beyond specification. So yeah, what I like is the hardest and the second hardest option, but try them out, see what you like best. The travel of the brake pedal is, I would say, it's a medium travel. It's around 30 millimeters. Feels good to me. I probably would use slightly more travel if it was possible, but that's not the case with these pedals. But then again, it's fine how it is. And as I already said, I have 2 add-ons mounted to the pedal here that I can definitely recommend. It's a damper kit with adjustable damping. That definitely helps with the trail braking feel. I feel like with a damper on the brake, you can modulate the trail off more smoothly. Hard to describe, but I can recommend to try it out. And the second thing, it's like an active pedal on a budget. I mounted a transducer on the brake that is being controlled by SimHub, and it lets me feel lockups or ABS, stuff like that. It's very handy, and I think more brake pedals should have something like this. It's super easy to mount on these. So yeah, link in the description if you want to try it. Can highly recommend. And again, we have a very clever lever setup here. We have this gray part that is leaning against this rod here in the back. And then the elastomer stack pushes onto the gray part very close to this position where it rests. And then in the bottom, there's the load cell at the other end of the lever. There's also a little spring here to hold it into place. But the end of the lever then pushes onto the load cell that is mounted in the rear here. And that gives you the brake signal. Really clever design. I mean, it's basic physics, but that way you can use a lower end load cell that saves price without really compromising the performance in terms of brake pressure. The brake overall feels pretty similar to most elastomer based brakes, and I don't mean that in any negative way. I think considering what we are paying for these pedals, this is a good thing, because the brake feels great. Honestly, there's nothing I can really criticize here, apart from maybe I would love to have slightly more travel, but it should work for most people. Mounting the pedals to the rig is slightly cumbersome. You have a screw that goes in between these 2 bolts here, but this is in the way. I mean, if you don't change your pedals every week like me because of the reviews and everything, it's probably not a big deal. But mounting them, well, takes maybe 5 minutes instead of 2. So not a big deal, but just something I noticed. Okay, electronics, they are mounted on the throttle pedal here. There's no connector, so you have to put in the stripped cable of the load cell into these terminal blocks. The cables are very flimsy, and I don't know how expensive it would be to make, but maybe a little crimped on connector that you can just like plug in would be better. But it's not a big deal. It just would be cleaner with a connector. The ADC being used here, HX717, it's a 24-bit ADC made for load cells. It's being downsampled to 15 bits to output to the game. 15 bits, more than good enough. Nobody needs such a high resolution on pedals. And the noise performance of the electronics, among the best that I've tried here. No noise issues, even though my rig is pretty noisy with all the devices connected to it, but these have been perfectly fine. There's no software provided by Najam Simtec. You do the calibration in DI-View. I'll show you in the rig how to do it. I wish there was a software. Maybe there will be one in the future, who knows. But DI-View works. It's just a little less comfortable compared to the calibration of pedals that come with their own software. But yeah, I would say we'll hop into the rig. I will show you the calibration and I will talk a little bit how the pedals feel while driving. Alright, I will quickly show you how to do the calibration with DI-View, which is for ACC R-Factor in most games, and also how to do it for iRacing. So when you start DI-View, make sure that the Najam Simtec pedals are selected here, and you should see some inputs when you press the pedals. Right-click both the X and the Y-axis. Y is throttle, X is the brake. And what you want to do is look at this value, it's around 150, and then press the brake with your desired maximum pressure and remember that value. So let's say we want to calibrate it to round about here, which is 22,000. What you want to do, go to right-click, calibration, the minimum. I would recommend to add like a dead zone of 1,000 raw values. That way when I rest my foot on the brake, I'm at about 1,000, so that seems about right. And then 23,000 for the maximum. And the center, you want to be minimum plus maximum divided by 2, so 12,000 in this case. If you want to have like a slightly non-linear curve, then play with the center value. If you want a linear curve, then just set it to the middle of minimum plus maximum. Click OK, and then you will see the black value is the calibrated one, and then repeat the same for the throttle as well. So this actually reads at 0 when I rest my foot on it. It's about 1,000. Maximum is 22,000. So we'll set the calibration to 1,000, 21,000, and then the middle of that, which would be 11,000. So I've already done it here, no need to change this. Keep in mind, iRacing, being iRacing, will of course ignore the calibration. Go to Documents, iRacing, then locate the joycalib.yaml. Open it with a text editor of your choice. Make sure to go through the pedal calibration before you do that, otherwise you will not have the entry here. And what you want to do is like look up these values here, for example, x-axis calibration, and put the minimum and maximum into the joy calib as well. Make sure that calib center and minimum is the same value, otherwise weird things will happen, like introducing a dead zone or something. You cannot get non-linear feel with iRacing, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm not exactly sure how this calib center works, but if I put it to something that is not the minimum, then I will just get a lot of dead zone. So just copy these values, 1,000 to 21,000 for Y and 1,000 to 23,000 for X, and then launch iRacing, and it should use these settings. All right, here we are. When you go to the options now, you will see that it actually uses those settings. I don't know why we have a clutch here assigned. From the steering wheel. And this feels about right. All right, here we go. You will also see reference data. You can ignore that. So the more signally colors are my inputs here. And yeah, to be honest, the pedals, they just feel like any other good Loadcell pedal. I can't really say that there's anything in terms of how the pedals feel where you notice the price. It's perfectly fine, to be honest. The throttle I really like, because you actually have to push it relatively hard. You can, if it's too hard for you, you can reduce this and make it a bit softer, but you cannot go super soft on it. And I think that's a good thing, because the throttle shouldn't be soft. But if you want super, super, super weak, you can't really do it on these pedals. Maybe with a different spring, but then you would have to source it yourself. The brake, it feels good. Trail braking is no problem, especially also with the added damper here. It's like 40 euros or so for the damper. Can definitely recommend it. It feels very nice to control, as you can see in the traces. The signal looks good. And honestly, I would have no issue to just use these pedals for the rest of my sim racing life. Yeah, it would be cool if there was maybe a software where you can calibrate it a bit more easily, but I think that's not really a deal breaker. DI view and the text editor for iRacing, it's fine. You don't always recalibrate these, so it is a bit more cumbersome than with a software tool, but I think it's acceptable. And who knows, maybe there will be some tool in the future. In the end, all you have to do is like update the firmware. The lap times I've been doing with these pedals were absolutely comparable to the VRS pedals, for example. The brake can not do as crazy values as the VRS. Oh my god, look at these. Look at my driving. As the VRS pedals, but I don't use these high brake pressures anymore. I typically am around 70-80 kilograms now. I'm not using everything these pedals can do in theory in terms of brake pressure, so enough headroom for me. If you want to go super high crazy brake pressure, then these might not be for you. They top out at about 95 kilograms. But yeah, as you can see in the trail off here, it's very nice. The signal looks good. There's not a lot of noise on it. And overall, I can only say positive things about it. It's an insanely good priced pedal set, and it also performs very well. But let's jump to the conclusion. All right, so 185 euros plus the price of these little add-ons. I think it's less than 100 euros for everything. But at the price point these pedals come, they are pretty much unbeatable. Do I have used better pedals? Yes. Not necessarily in performance, but definitely in terms of how pedals can look like. Do I have used worse pedals that cost way more than these? Also, yes. When I've been using these pedals, my lap times and performance on track was absolutely comparable to pedals that are way more expensive, costing like 5 times as much as these. Throttle feels good. I like that it can do really high pressure on the blade. That helps a lot with modulation, especially on corner exit. Brakes also very nice. Even without the add-ons, it's a very good feeling brake that compares to other elastomer-based setups. But if you get these pedals, I can definitely recommend to add these little add-ons, because the damper definitely helps with brake feel on trail braking, and the haptic feedback is just, it helps a ton to feel how the car behaves in the braking zone. Can really recommend adding these. I've tried rumble motors in the past on pedals, also nice, but using a transducer feels so much better in my opinion. Don't be intimidated by the fact that you have to assemble these yourself. It's really easy to do. Just follow the instruction video. So yeah, I really like the approach of using basic physics pretty much to keep the cost down by using lower end load cells. This is something that other companies fail to do. And honestly, if I had to use these pedals for the rest of my life, I would be perfectly happy to do so. If you don't really look at them while driving, you do not notice that you have pedals that cost less than 200 euros here. So yeah, as you can probably tell, I can definitely recommend these pedals. I've had 0 issues with them apart from the little squeaking. That was an easy fix with some PTFE dry loop, and they performed very well for me. If you have any questions, feel free to join the Discord or just leave a comment down below. I'll happily try to answer all of them. And if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel to not miss future videos. The next pedal set we'll be reviewing is the Cube Controls ones, also very nice pedals. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye bye.